Hey, hey, hey!
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the first meeting of the Panvala Awards Committee. So we're here to discuss the first batch of applications that has come in for Panvala token grants. To begin with, what Panvala really is a token system that organizes people who want to make Ethereum safer. The system works as a wrapper around the existing ecosystem of grant funders, corporate open source projects, and volunteers who are currently funding the work that makes Ethereum safer. We don't want to change anything about that existing ecosystem. We just want to wrap it in a token system that makes it sustainable. Right now, all that work is being funded by teams that raise funds in kind of a one-shot deal, and those funds are eventually going to run out. But what we want is something sustainable to keep that work going indefinitely. Back in November, we announced the beginning of this Panvala Token Grants program, and we opened applications for it. About 2 weeks ago, we announced the first batch of applications that came in from Gnosis, Status, and Level K. Over the past 2 weeks, more applications have come in from more of the ecosystem, and now we're ready to discuss which ones we're going to let into this batch of grants. There's a limited number of tokens available in each grant, in each batch. In this first batch, there's about 2.1 million tokens available to distribute. And the second batch, there's going to be about 2 million tokens available to distribute. We had applications for about 2.6 million tokens, and there's only 2.1 million tokens to give out. So normally that would lead to competition, and some of those applications would be kind of shoved out of the batch. They wouldn't make the cut. But we talked to the applicants, we gave them the lay of the land, and they adjusted their token requests so we would come in under that 2.1 million mark. So theoretically, we have enough tokens to issue in this batch to give tokens to the tokens requested by every grant applicant. But that won't always be the case. In the second batch that starts right after this one finishes on February 1st, we expect to have even more applications for fewer tokens. There's only going to be 2 million tokens in that batch. So this is the kind of meeting that we're going to hold to go over the applications that have come through and decide which applications are actually going to make it into the batch. So with me, I have the Panvala Awards Committee, which has been appointed by the Panvala Launch Committee, the Panvala Launch team, which is Consensus Diligence. We chose a group of people who we think will give good advice about which grants to recommend to the broader Panvala community. So the committee is composed of Evan Van Ness, Paul Lansky, and Brian Eisenbach. Evan Van Ness creates the very popular Week in Ethereum newsletter that keeps everybody up to date on what's going on in the ever-growing Ethereum ecosystem. Paul Lansky works with the Giveth team, which is a decentralized nonprofit platform. Professionally, he works in corporate social responsibility, and for Giveth, he focuses on being an ambassador for the community and advising them in their governance processes. And we have Brian Eisenbach, who's one of the organizers of ETH Security, which is a group of people in the Ethereum ecosystem who are working on security-related issues. It's really been night and day having everybody with good channels to discuss with one another. We had an unconference before ETH Berlin that was security-focused, and efforts like that are very useful for the ecosystem. So we're very happy to have the Panvala Awards Committee here to discuss this first batch of grants. We've prepared a review of the initial applications that came in, so they've had time to deliberate over those. So they're going to discuss the grants, decide on which ones to actually approve, to recommend in their slate of grants, and that recommendation will be what stands for this first batch. The way that governance typically works in Panvala when the system's live on the chain is that anybody can recommend a slate of proposals for the contracts to take. But only one of those slates can go through every quarter. So every slate has to have tokens staked on those slate of proposals. And if your slate loses, the tokens that were staked on it are going to be lost as well. What we want to do is create a community where consensus is built off-chain, and you really only create a slate of proposals when you're really confident that the broader community is going to support the slate that you put together. So that's what we're trying to demonstrate here. So when the system's live on the mainnet, the Panvala Awards Committee can continue making recommendations for slates, but if the community wants to go in a different direction, they can always compete with them by creating their own slates. So with that said, I'll hand things off to the Panvala Awards Committee.
All right. Thank you very much for your introduction, Niren. As for the sake of transparency, as we said before, maybe what we should do is to go over each one of the proposal, and if we have any comments, please feel free to say it. And maybe for the sake of this centralization, what we should do is every one of us should read one of the proposals. So let me start with the first proposal.
On what scale?
What do you mean on what scale?
You mean just binary, yes or no?
No. Just feel free to make any comments that you want,
Okay.
and then we can wrap it up. If there's no comments, then we will go to the yes or no, and if there are any comments, we can discuss about it.
Sounds good.
Should we start?
Let's go.
Perfect. So Gnosis Safe Recovery, a proposal to make Ethereum safer by helping users to recover access to their Gnosis Safe, even in case access to all their devices was lost. Right, so this has been submitted by the Gnosis team, and as a project summary, they have, I'm just gonna read it straight off. Today, if you leave your private key, you lose your digital assets. This huge burden does not exist for legacy assets, and we need to make sure that Ethereum users have account recovery methods that give them peace of mind. We have implemented a research prototype of social recovery for Gnosis Safe. The smart contract allows users to provide a list of friends and the number of friends needed to recover the account. We would like to combine this initial approach with a variation of time lock recovery, sometimes referred to as paralysis proof. That requires users to put up a bond that would be lost in case of a malicious recovery request had been put up. With the resulting prototype, we intend to perform user research and integrate an interface for customizable recovery options into the Gnosis Safe apps. To be honest, for me, this is pretty straightforward. It's a no-brainer. We need to make recovery, account recovery, easier. And anything towards that direction, for me, it gets a yes, especially in these initial stages. I should say that from my side, I'm targeting these on a very initial stage, let's see what's happening in the ecosystem. And just like tokens will get more and more scarce for the following grant applications, will be more and more strict, or I will try to be more and more strict. But on this time, for me, this would be a yes. Any comments?
Yeah, I'd like to agree with that, and also kind of social recovery is really cool because it not only allows you to like share with your friends, it also allows you to interoperate with different types of businesses. Like Hodl has a social key recovery service where they take one of those shards of key and provide it as a service. So like you always have someone online and available in case you need to use that service. So social key recovery is really cool from that perspective. And it's also really cool because it's social. So you get the chance to kind of start to introduce your friends who may not be as familiar with these types of activities as you kind of dive down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, I consider key management to be one of the unsolved problems, and Gnosis Safe is probably one of the best things working on it. So makes sense to me.
Awesome. I just realized that I skipped the project timeline. But yeah, by Q3, they plan to have mainnet release. For me, that would be a yes. So, and for you as well. So anybody wants to take him for the next proposal?
Sure, I'll read it. This one is from Status, from Corey at Status. We are currently working on a platform to monitor and alert and eventually mitigate high-value blockchain assets. The system will be able to watch function-level events on specified smart contracts, as well as white blacklist who should be able to call in said functions. Furthermore, it will have time-based event monitoring of addresses from white blacklisted addresses to check for abnormal activity on high-value wallets. This will eventually be open sourced when the MVP is created to encourage cross-platform collaboration. We will work with other teams doing similar work like Tenderly to produce a general purpose solution. that meets Status's needs and can be extended by each team to meet their own needs.
Any comments on it?
So I think this is a pretty great proposal because it gives us more monitoring capabilities that don't really exist. And Corey from Status is going to participate with another company that actually came out of Beth Berlin with that project idea. So we should see a lot of good cross collaboration there.
Agree with that.
Perfect. Absolutely. Brian, you want to read the next one?
All right. I will take the next one. So Level K has submitted a registry builder voting application, vote weighting application, that will be a reusable library that people can use to implement token curated registries. So they've done a lot of work on this, but their aim here is to build a readable and modular library for the registries and other types of TCRs. They say a common library for the TCR concept would allow anyone in the ecosystem to experiment with it, with systems that rely on these types of registries while focusing on a common security analysis on one code base. So for this project, they're going to add support for some new governance mechanisms by abstracting the voting weight away from the token weighted voting in the voting module. This will enable flexibility when calculating a user's voting weight. New governance mechanisms such as reputation-based voting, one person, one vote for registries that have KYC participants, and quadratic voting, also for KYC registries, can be added to the library.
I'm a great fan of common code bases. So
yeah, so I really think this is a good good project. I think the TCR concept has been gaining a lot of traction, so it makes sense to have someone like Level K that's done a lot of research on this topic to create a stable code base to experiment with in terms of the economics. I actually would say I prefer this a little bit more than the next project. So one of the recommendations I was going to make is to actually allocate some of the tokens from the following project to this one, because I think it's a little bit more useful to have a common code base for this kind of thing.
For the next project, you mean the oracles?
You know what? I skipped it.
Yeah, that's right.
I meant the oracles. I meant the oracles. Wow.
Yeah.
So I'll just go over that one too, because why not? They're also aiming to make another library for oracles. So they've done a significant amount of work on oracles. That's actually what I was trying to talk about, so sorry about that. Oracles are going to be obviously very heavily used in the ecosystem, so having a common code base for security analysis on oracles would be really important. So they have data feed style oracles already. They'll enable support for dynamic data such as token price. Currently, the tidbit library only supports oracles for individual events that are recorded on it once. The application-specific data feed oracles are currently being used by projects like MakerDAO for their ETH price oracle. The new data feed oracle contract interface is listed in the grant. So, yeah, my apologies for the previous comment. I meant the oracles that I think should deserve a little bit higher weighting on their output.
I thought we were only making binary yes or no calls. Can we play with the token allocation?
So I think the commentary is useful feedback for the teams as they're applying. The idea behind the applications is for the applicant themselves to set the amount that they're asking for, and for the committee to have basically an up or down say of whether they're going to include the application on their slate or whether they're not. But giving that kind of feedback helps those teams know as they continue to apply in the future, and helps other teams know what the community is really looking for in these grant proposals.
I think the fact that we're doing it off chain gives us a lot of flexibility, because it's just writing in a document, but when this happens on chain, I guess it's going to be a matter of taking the application and accepting it or rejecting it.
That makes a lot of sense.
So I think we should stick for this moment, even though I agree with you, Brian. Maybe we should stick to the yes or no format.
There we go.
At the end of the day, we can always speak to K Labs and go like, hey, we actually think that this is much greater than the other one and much more useful. But
well, this is level K. K Labs is next.
Yeah, I skipped it. They're both by level K, so they can obviously use it in slightly different ways with no real problems.
They can arbitrate internally. Arbitrate that.
Yeah. Which is an interesting conversation topic in and of itself.
Correct. That is very correct. So if you put 3 applications and you get only 2, can you use the tokens for one of the proposal that hasn't passed? Huh. Interesting. All right. So both would be a yes from my side.
Yeah, I would agree. Both.
Funnily enough, mentioning 3 projects, we have K-Lab Explorer coming as the third proposal. And it's a proposal to make Ethereum safer by helping developers explore the formal proofs of their contract systems. K-Lab is a tool for generating and debugging K-framework reachability proofs tailored for formal verification of Ethereum smart contracts. So the K-Lab server receives proof requests and dispatches them to K-framework's proving tool while the client builds and explores proofs. For this project, we will build out the client-server architecture of K-Lab further to provide an easy interface for exploring proofs for developers who submit their smart contracts along with specifications. A prototype of this Explorer has been built using the multi-collateral DAI system as the test case at stablecoin.technology.
A no-brainer.
Any comments on that?
Formal verification stuff is absolutely necessary.
Yeah,
moving forward,
and especially making it more accessible to developers. Formal verification proofs are very difficult to get a handle on and get correct. So more usability of it is really important.
Sounds very good. So next project, Evan.
K-semantics for WebAssembly, also from Martin from Maker and DAppHub. KVM implements a model of the EVM in K, which allows specifications of EVM smart contracts to be executed by the K framework. As WebAssembly gains adoption in the Ethereum ecosystem, models of WebAssembly and EWASM in K will be needed to formally verify these contracts. For this project, we'll build out KWASM and KEWASM so that we can do formal verification and apply other forms of formal methods to smart contracts built for EWASM. The specification format we have developed with K-Lab can probably remain the same for EWASM contracts, but we need to build out the backend to support proof search. So yeah, I mean, the signal is that we are going to have another virtual machine. So if we're going to have another virtual machine, then we should have that backend in K. So makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think that, yeah, I agree. And I think that this project will be really important to help formalize the EWASM project. One of the big helpers has been the K's Jello paper for the EVM. And if we're able to get that kind of out of the gate with a formal semantic for the entire virtual machine that we're intending on moving to, we can be much more certain about moving to it when the time comes.
Stamped.
hashing it out.
Brian, want to read that one?
Yeah, I will give it a read. So Hashing It Out is a podcast by Corey Petty and the gang. They're, I think, primarily covering a lot of more of the developer aspects of things in the cryptocurrency community, especially Ethereum. And he has a proposal to make Ethereum safer by producing a couple podcast episodes about Ethereum security. So he has a few people that he's already interviewed that have kind of started to touch on these topics. So he hopes to create a series of 5 security-focused podcast episodes with some of the people from the security community that he's a part of. So he aims to publish these 5 episodes during 2019.
What I'd like to say here is that that seems like an existing project that is not particularly focused on getting the grant, and it will happen anyway. And that seems pretty obvious because it's not a technical proposal like this, but most of the other projects would and were already thought out as well. So I see absolutely no problem to fund this with the grant.
Yeah, I think this is an important one to support because it gets that message out there about Ethereum security, and it starts to aggregate some of the mind share of where this conversation is happening. So people that are interested in either learning more or getting involved know where to go and understand exactly what the state of Ethereum security is.
I agree. It's always good to have more security-focused podcast episodes.
Podcast information, educating in general is absolutely crucial. Right. So what would you bounty, guys? So if you were to have, let's say, an unspecified amount of tokens in order to make Ethereum safer, what would you do with it? I like this proposal because it's sort of like a meta proposal. It's like another utilization of the Panvala tokens. So what the Bounties network proposes is to distribute 80% of the tokens that they receive through this grant, distributed through bounties that will be based on community input to determine what the most useful small tasks can be done to improve Ethereum security. So the tokens received through these bounties will not initially be transferable by the recipients. Instead, they will be included in the initial distribution of tokens in the live Panvala system, where they will be normal transferable tokens. That's just the way, the ending part is just the way of ensuring that when Panvala is live, then is when the tokens will be actually issued. I love it. It's completely decentralized. It's like, okay, it's a meta usage of Panvala tokens. So I love it. And it serves for not so much the big grants like we're doing right now, but like, okay, there needs to be this little task done for something in security. So I love it.
Yeah, makes sense to me. Sort of a time delay release kind of deal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. This is going to be an interesting experiment and kind of validation of the Panvala system and how, you know, the grants aren't really like directly given to each other, where you can sort of track how things are moving along and seeing if it's adding value to the system. And because, you know, it can be divided into smaller pieces, then what a grants committee like us can really keep track of, I see it has value from that perspective.
I'd like to say that as part of the previous discussion that we had from this meeting, this release, it's like a time delay release, and if the bounties, or we see no value, then actually there is no value on these small tasks, because you cannot really do improve Ethereum security too much by doing such small tasks, or we don't like the way it's done. Maybe that's not going to be recommended the next time. But it's an experiment worth doing, I would say.
Agreed.
Cool.
ECC, capture the flag. ECC is an Ethereum conference in Paris organized by SF, a nonprofit organization. ECC 2019 is from March 5 through 7th. During this conference, Ethereum security teams are arranging a capture the flag event where people compete to attack vulnerable smart contract systems that have been designed for the event. SF will promote the capture the flag event at ECC to maximize participation, which will add in spreading knowledge about Ethereum security to the attendees. This includes posters at the event, placement in the agenda of the event, and posts on Twitter. Everybody loves capture the flags. I think ECC was a great event last year. I'm sure it's going to be great this year. Seems like a good use of tokens to me.
Capture the flag.
Yeah, I would agree.
Who doesn't love it?
Who wants to read the next one then?
I'll do it.
I guess.
Who is this guy? This next one? I don't even know.
Brian, do you make the honors?
Yeah, so somebody threw my name on this. The grant here is to give ourselves in wonderful nepolistic fashion some tokens in reward for us deliberating over to these proposals and making our recommendations as it goes along. So we're hoping that this kind of continues the cycle and rewards us for our work that we put in evaluating these grants.
So to clarify a little bit on this particular application, Bryant, if you don't want to be the name on the application, that's totally fine. I did throw your name on it. I thought we were on the same page, but if we're not, like, basically the idea is that there has to be one name on each application who's like the point of contact. So you can, if you don't want to be that person, you don't have to be that person. You can make one of the other people do it. That's just how we have to have one.
I am A-okay with it, and you just made the discussion happen that I wanted to happen.
Excellent.
Absolutely. I just want to say that when the token capacitator is there, a lot of the token capacitator's idea is that people will throw in tokens in there in order to keep it generating grants. So that's a good way to at least ensure, from my side, for full transparency, that's a good way to ensure that there's going to be an influx as well, not only an outgoing of the tokens.
Is it? So I actually had a question. Does the committee end up being different each time?
So not necessarily. Like if the token holders continue to support the recommendations that you guys make in perpetuity, you could be the Panvala Awards committee forever. We are going to ask for more people who want to be a part of the awards committee to tell us that they want to be a part of it, and we'll try to add more people who seem like they would be good additions. When the system's live on the mainnet, the Panvala Awards committee no longer has a special place, so there will probably be people who form their own groups and try to compete and make their own recommendations. And as long as you guys are doing the best job at corralling the consensus of the ecosystem, your slates will win.
Sounds fair to me.
Move to approve.
So to give a little bit of background on that one, since I wrote it and got their approval for it, the precedent that we want to be able to set with this type of grant is that the people doing the work to review all these applications coming in, talk to the various teams that are trying to apply for applications, and get recommendation out to the community, that's real work that takes time. There are people on this call who are up at 2 a.m. trying to make this thing happen, and that's a sacrifice that shouldn't be swept under the rug. We want to make sure that the people who are doing this work are acknowledged for it with tokens. So we want to set a precedent where the people who are recommending a slate of grants, include a grant for themselves on that slate. Maybe future recommenders will decide to not do that, but we want to start off the community with that sort of assumption and see where things go from there.
I like that a lot. It kind of creates a closed ecosystem of money flow, or token flow, if you will.
Great. I'm going to read the next one, Panvala.
You mentioned that you think that this would be important to keeping tokens flowing into the token capacitor. Do you mind elaborating on that just a little bit? I'm taking notes to use for our internal team purposes.
Right. So as far as my understanding goes, the token capacitator is basically a big bucket that disburses those grants. At any point, Niran, you interrupt me and say, "Stop saying bullshit." But this bucket will empty at some point. So the Panvala is the Panvala capacitator or capacitor. What's capacitator or capacitor?
Capacitor.
Capacitor. Thanks. So it's an interesting experiment for me because it relies on people actually wanting it to continue doing its job. And a grant like this one is an interesting experiment to me because by me who has a stake in the game, because I am interested in making Ethereum safer and I want to do this, therefore I get tokens with it, and therefore I can decide whether this is an experiment that is working and I want to continue working, and I can put in this capacitor, I can put those tokens, I can refill this capacitor in order for it to continue giving grants, or I can say like, okay, this is crap, I'm not going to do it again. And what I said before, when I mentioned, is that for me, having these tokens is a way for me to have skin in the game, number one, and number two, what I plan to do is to contribute upfront to that, because I think it's a great project. So that's what I'm going to be doing with my tokens.
Yeah, that's really interesting and helpful. So you do think the majority or even all of these tokens you would contribute back to the capacitor yourself?
That's correct. The only way that I would not contribute those tokens to the capacitor would be by staking them to submit a slate of proposals in the future.
Yeah, I think it may actually end up being an interesting sort of reputation system, because you can kind of see on chain who these tokens are going to, which projects. And if you really don't think they add value, you're probably less inclined to buy them. So you may end up with kind of like a colored coin issue, or it could not be an issue because it actually reduces the amount in circulation, which ends up giving them more value. So there's a lot of really interesting economics at play, and I'm really excited to see how it plays out.
Definitely.
Yeah, this is definitely an experiment. We don't know what people are going to do with their tokens when they have it. Basically, the options to, like, since the Panvala Awards Committee is going to propose that you guys yourselves receive tokens, the options of what you do with that token is basically to hold them and use them to vote in future governance decisions. You can donate them, like get rid of them and deposit them back in the system to charge it back up. You can stake them and either just for a slate of proposals or something else, or you could sell them to somebody else who wants to donate them into the system. That's totally fine as well. There's nothing wrong with selling these tokens. They're designed to be traded between people. So that's part of what you can do with it.
So I'd like to see for people who might be watching this, if there's anybody, that there's actually a very well thought out system. There's been many discussions with Niran before, and I really appreciate his willingness to experiment, and the time and amount of effort that he has put in doing something like this is something that should be acknowledged for sure. So thanks, Niran.
No problem. Thanks for being a part of this.
Right, the next proposal is the Panvala Mark Council. It's the Panvala Mark applications will be recommendations, so that the marks are well, let me just read that. The Panvala Mark Council evaluates Panvala Mark applications and makes recommendations to the token holders for marks to approve. We evaluate new applications and record a final meeting where we go through the mark applications and decide which one to recommend to the community. We are prepared to evaluate the first batch of grant applications when the system is live and will advise the launch team as the governance process is designed and refined. That's the other side of the Panvala ecosystem, where the Panvala mark actually marks the smart contracts that are considered safe by the Panvala Mark Council. So the same way that the awards committee receives a grant as well, the Panvala Mark Council should receive a grant as well for their work. That's a bit the idea behind it.
What are the metrics that you use to consider something safe?
That I use to consider something safe. That's something that the Panvala Mark Council will do, and will in a very similar meeting like this one, actually.
Okay.
So that's a good question. We held basically a demo meeting for a simple multi-sig contract wallet, where they went through the motions of deciding whether or not to recommend a smart contract for a Panvala Mark. So that video is recorded. We put together a blog post that kind of summarizes what happens, but there are a variety of things that they considered when they were evaluating that contract. They considered how many audits were done, who did the audits, what methods they used when they were doing the audits, who wrote the contract, how much experience they had, what team were they working with. There's a variety of information that they were taking into account as people who weren't directly auditing the contracts themselves. They were working with all the information they had to decide if they were going to recommend a mark for that contract to the token holders.
So I might have to actually say no to this one. A lot of the security community has been kind of back and forth on this concept of like stamping smart contracts. Like on one hand, you know, it's a good signal. It's a really easy thing to understand. Like, oh, this is safe. I can trust this. On the other hand, security is not like a one and done process. It's a continuous process. So the problem with stamps is that once given out, you'll have to reapply them on a regular interval or audit them or something. So it's just something to think about, that there may be some other issues at play, and a lot of the security community is very divided on whether this approach would be effective.
If it's a non-upgradable contract, then no reason that should exactly change. I mean, unless we, you know, have a hard fork where we change the gas for outgoes.
Yeah. There's a whole lot of different considerations, and really just like like when a 0-day vulnerability gets discovered, now that's a whole new class of contracts that are considered vulnerable to something that wasn't considered before. So like when we first discovered the reentrancy issue, that was kind of a 0-day, and there's you know, a chance of that happening. There's just a lot of really interesting you know, nuances to this kind of topic. Personally, I think it's really interesting. I have some thoughts more on like a continual process where you can actually remove the stamp if, like, you know, say on a monthly basis they don't meet some criteria. But like, I think there's ways to do it well and ways to do it poorly. But you know, from the security community, there is a real division on whether or not this is a good approach.
So just for a little more context, the Panvala marks can be removed through the same sort of proposal system that gets them on there in the first place. You can propose to remove them and just let them take their tokens back, or you can propose to remove them and slash the tokens that they deposited because they misrepresented the safety of the system. But that is an accurate summary of like the feelings in the broader security ecosystem. There's been a variety of proposals for ways to mark smart contracts, and there's no consensus on a way to do it that will actually satisfy people's needs. We, as the Panvala launch team, think that there is a good way to do it. but you as the Panvala Awards Committee are free to approve or reject this from your slate of recommended proposals.
And is it best of three here?
Is it majority or is it?
You guys can decide how you want to govern yourselves. You can decide majority. You could say that everything has to be unanimous. We did not give you a default. If you want a default, I can give you a default.
I'm okay with majority.
I'm okay with majority. And my vote would be a yes, because it's an experiment, because it's the mark is retractable, and the only thing that's a bit tricky for me is that really there needs to be an effort. There really needs to be an interest on keeping track of that mark and making sure that whenever there's a new change in the security scenario, you go back and you go like, okay, this is not secure anymore, and you want to do that. And the only way to actually create or generate incentives for doing that will be through actually giving more value to the Panvala token, and therefore, the more use cases that we can find, and the more experiments, and the more we distribute these tokens, and the more useful we make it, the better will be. So for me, there's an incentive to get it right, to get this experiment right, by donating, by granting this patch.
Oh, that means I'm the deciding vote, huh? Yeah, I think I lean towards yes, just because it's an experiment, and I don't know if it doesn't work, we can stop it in the future.
Majority has it.
Majority, yes, I would say.
Who wants to read the last one?
I guess I'll read the last one. I just wanted to make that interesting, so we made it interesting. It was fun.
Ah, woo!
So the last one is from Aragon 1. Sorry, they're a distributed team, or a decentralized team now. Voting relay protocol. So a proposal to make Ethereum safer by building a common implementation of scalable token voting for the community to build on top of. So the project summary says that straightforward implementations of token voting have high gas costs, which makes them expensive for users and bumps it up against the capacity of the blockchain. We need level 2 protocols for token voting with carefully chosen security guarantees for voting on Ethereum to take off. Aragon will build the voting relay protocol, which allows voters to submit proofs of their token balances to relayers who have staked tokens. These relayers write the outcome of the vote to the blockchain, but lose their tokens if anyone proves that the result was incorrect. This approach reduces the gas cost by a factor of 10, and further work to keep vote data off-chain can improve this further, and ideally improve privacy maybe. So their timeline is that they will build a working implementation of the VRP in 2019. It is a research project, so they expect to adjust course over time between the simple voting relay protocol, the full voting relay protocol, and then work to keep data off-chain in those protocols. So I would say this is a yes from me. I think it's important to start to explore scalability of like DAO-like voting mechanisms. We already know that the security of general purpose voting frameworks is kind of up in the air due to the work from Phil Diane. But in like token specific communities, this definitely has a lot of power. And, you know, like the level K proposal, we want good, strong core libraries that can be experimented with in terms of the economics without worrying about the security, because we're using a common implementation.
Just to highlight here the incredible work that Aragon is doing in decentralization. So I definitely think that they should keep. We should facilitate, if we can, their work on that aspect.
Agree with that. Makes sense to me.
What was the last proposal?
Yeah.
For one thing that we have forgotten to do is to say how many tokens people were going to get. So I'm just going to go over the summary of the applications and who's doing it. So and how many tokens we suggested, or they suggested, adjusted, as Niren was saying, for the fact that there was more proposals than tokens available. I'm just going to read the adjusted requests that they have said. So Gnosis, for the Gnosis Safe Recovery, will receive 375,000 Panvala tokens. Status for the infrastructure monitoring, 200,000. Level K for the dynamic oracles, 150,000, and for the registry builder vote weighing, 175,000. And here, for those who have picked up on this, is where Brian was saying that he considers the oracles more work and even more useful. So he would like to allocate more to these oracles. But as we said before, that would be we would only be able to say yes or no to their application. Finally, Maker and DAB for KLab Explorer, 175,000. Maker DAB as well for K-Semantics for WebAssembly, 200,000. Hashing it out, 100,000 for the Security Series podcast. Bounties Network for the proposal of decentralizing security through bounties is what would you bounty? Sorry, somebody's knocking the door. What would you bounty do? 140,000. Aseth for the Capture the Flag contest, 50,000. Panvala Awards Committee, 75,000. Panvala Mark Council, 75,000. And Aragon 1 for the Voting Relay Protocol, 300,000. In total, the requests are for 2,115,000 tokens. There we go. Nobody got that right.
Cool. So
Yeah.
just to confirm and get it said out loud, you guys agree to approve, to recommend all of the applications submitted on your slate of grant proposals.
Yes. Agreed.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Excellent. So the Panvala Awards Committee has recommended their first slate of grants for this first batch of tokens released from the token capacitor. Those tokens will be symbolically released on February 1st, but only really distributed when we launch the system on the mainnet in the middle of this year. February 1st marks the end of this first batch and the start of the second batch. In batch 2, there's going to be about 2 million tokens for us to distribute as token grants, a little bit less than was available in batch 1. Each batch gets a little bit smaller, the way the Bitcoin block reward does over time. For the batch after this one, there's going to be 1.9 million tokens left. And on January 15th, 2106, there's going to be a batch with just 1 token left that we'll distribute. But again, our goal isn't to just watch the tokens be distributed over time. Our goal is to recharge the token capacitor by buying tokens from grant recipients and depositing them back into the system as donations, so we can keep on doing grants in perpetuity. So what happens next is that we open the applications for batch 2 of proposals. We want people from all over the ecosystem to be participating in the system. Anybody who does work to make Ethereum safer should really be applying for these token grants, so we can get all the work that's being done under one banner and find sustainable funding for it. You can be involved in the system by requesting to be on the Panvala Awards Committee that you just saw. There's a good bunch of people already on it. We'd love to have more. If you think you'd be a good fit for it, let us know. You can also apply for token grants to be involved, but you can also be involved without ever touching tokens at all. We want as many people as possible who believe in making Ethereum safer to buy tokens and donate them into the system. But what we need most isn't your money. What we need is your power. We want everybody who's who believes in the mission of Panvala to use their influence to make donations happen, even if they're not making donations themselves. And what that means is that when merchants, companies, or individuals make donations to Panvala, we want a community of allies that are there ready to be loyal to those companies instead of their competitors, because they make donations to the system, they support the goals of the system, and they end up making Ethereum safer on our behalf. So join our community, join our Telegram channel, and follow us on Twitter. And I hope you guys keep on watching what we're doing here and find out how you can be a part of it. We think that this system of cooperation is really something new that has a lot of potential, but it can only work with your help. Thanks for watching. Thanks to the Panvala Awards Committee for giving their time and late nights to be a part of this experiment. And we'll see you again soon in our next meeting. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much. Have a great one.
Thank you all so much.
Take care,
Thanks, guys.
fellas.
Thank you, guys.